Welcome to Impact. It's the Science and Education segment. I'm Barbara Brabetz. My guest today, Dr. Jonathan Halpert. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Barbara. Great to be here.
We appreciate having you here at the program, especially in this flu season, because you're here to talk about influenza, what's going on out there, the signs and symptoms, and then what to do about it, when to just stay home and when to get to the doctor. So let me do a little backup. You are a physician now, but you were not born a physician. Where do you hail from?
Originally born and raised in Long Island in southern Connecticut, and went to college, had the privilege of going to college at Skidmore College in the early 1980s.
Right in the area?
Mm-hmm. And pretty much stayed in the area following that. Didn't go to medical school until the middle 1990s, and went to school at Albany and stayed there for training as well, residency in emergency medicine. And had the privilege of working for St. Peter's Hospital Emergency Department following that, and spent several years there. Ultimately came to work for Prime Care Physicians, leading their recently created urgent care center program. And
that is that you physically locate yourself for work these days at the 400 Patroon Creek building,
That's
right
correct.
on Washington Avenue, where
right
it's kind of like the mecca of doctors' offices right there.
Uptown medical megaplex.
I like it. I like it. It sounds like a mall with pills.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
So at Prime Care Urgent Care, you're really on the front line of seeing people with infectious disease of all sorts. And in fact, talk about front line, we had to delay this shoot because you were actually sick with the flu. You're not the only one. So let's talk about influenza-like illness. I mean, that's what CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, really looks for. Why we pay so close attention to it, and why does it seem to happen so often?
Well, influenza-like illness, or ILI, is kind of a garbage can term in my opinion. It encompasses a wide variety of illness that may be directly related to influenza virus infection or other respiratory viral infections as well. And many people certainly present with symptoms consistent with that relative to runny nose, cough, febrile symptoms, feverish symptoms, ache and pain, headache, that kind of thing, but may not in fact carry a true diagnosis of influenza infection, which is of course clinic or made by a laboratory analysis of some sort.
Right. We usually don't have to go that far.
Typically not. We do a lot of surveillance and assay in my facility for that. We prefer to pursue it from that direction if we can, though not everyone coming in has, as we say, a positive swab and is diagnosed positively with influenza, though we think the clinical suspicion is strong enough that we'll call them influenza-like in some way, shape, or form.
So let's do the myths and the facts about the flu. Do people usually, when we talk about the stomach flu, we hear about vomiting, 24 hours, really, really sick for a short amount of time and then get better. Is that influenza?
Absolutely not. Certainly there are many folks with a similar conception relative to what that is all about, and with influenza there may be some gastroenterological side effects associated, but influenza itself is really a respiratory tract disease, where stomach flu is not. It's an intestinal tract disease, typically foodborne in nature and oftentimes viral in nature as well. Currently there's a large circulating novovirus infection going around as well, but that's not influenza. When we think about influenza, we talk about an acute respiratory tract febrile viral illness.
Now, I've been vaccinated pretty much every year of my adult life for the flu.
Good for you.
Well, I work with snotty 18-year-olds where you get all ages, but, you know, being a college professor, you know, they'll sneeze on your page and hand it in. So I'm kind of icky about that, but I get my vaccines. How come I have to get a vaccine every year? Why isn't one good enough?
Well, there's different kinds of immunity that your body forms, quite honestly. Immunity that relates to the influenza virus is short duration, short-lived. And you can certainly develop immunity from exposure to the virus itself via illness and disease, getting sick, or through vaccination. But the vaccination, typically that immunity wanes after about a year's time. Now that varies from individual to individual, and certainly the fact that there are different strains of influenza that circulate from year to year and within a given year really alter the amount, the degree of immunity that one manifests greatly.
So like with the cold, you get a different cold every single time, essentially,
Pretty
just
much.
a little bit of variant of what you've had in the past.
Correct.
Because your body really hasn't seen it before. So the same thing can go on with the flu. There's right now we have kind of a small cluster of different varieties of flu that are out there, most of which are covered by the vaccine that people can get if they can find vaccines still out there.
We have some.
Good. Oh, that's good. Prime care, urgent care. 400 Patroon Creek. Rush. Yes. So who picks what ones are in that cocktail?
Well, folks from the World Health Organization and the CDC do the picking, and they pick about a year ahead of time, and they look at global trends of evolving influenza patterns that come typically out of Asia and typically spread in an east to west pattern and sweep across the globe over the ensuing year. And they look at what the trends have been for the northern hemisphere versus the southern hemisphere versus the tropics, actually. Tropics, there's not a lot of selection that goes on. They get everything all the time.
Oh, poor guys.
Hemispherically, it does tend to vary, though, from north to south. The public health folks, globally and nationally, then make a selection based on what they think is going to occur at a given time where we are here in America.
Right. So hopefully we're not taken unawares by like a nasty H1N1, which was a few years back.
Well, the nature of the virus itself, it's a genetically highly active individual, and it has a tendency to want to change its stripes occasionally, and that does cause problems in terms of our own immune system dealing with it, and protections like immunization dealing with it as well, which is what happened in 2009.
Sure, and we have a lot of global transport of disease these days.
Absolutely.
We have people who can be in Asia on a Tuesday, and they can be in North America on a Wednesday.
Absolutely.
And they bring with them a whole set of creatures.
In 2009, we saw some of the earliest cases of H1N1 in our office. Our office is roughly across the street from the UAlbany campus.
Sure.
And if you recall, in 2009, the first outbreak of H1N1 was in Queens, in New York City, at a public high school. And a lot of folks who populate the UAlbany campus come from the greater metropolitan New York City area, and there was a lot of transmission of that from downstate to upstate. And we are located very proximal to that, as I said, and we see a lot of their patients.
And they populate local establishments, and unfortunately, let's talk about how influenza spreads. I did bring a prop with me here, the good old Purell. It's certainly a brand that we've all heard, and we kind of use it as a generic like Kleenex, but this stuff, does it work? The hand sanitizer, is this the best defense against flu, is what I should probably say.
The best defense against flu is probably, as they say, a strong offense, which means preventing it from occurring in the first place. So being immunized as you do, as I do, on a yearly basis is your best bet to prevent it. However, you are engaged actively in a very public setting, large group setting. I am engaged very actively in large group setting, public health-wise. We are exposed all the time, and our body is continuously assaulted by this.
You're making me want to push the lever.
With influenza, it's an airborne transmission, aerosol droplet type transmission. So that's really a function of sneezing, coughing, breathing on, certainly kissing, hugging. Those kinds of mechanisms can exist, but it's those airborne aerosols that one needs to be wary of. So, of course, people traditionally complain. They say, I got the flu shot and I got the flu anyway. My first question is, well, let's say, where were you when you got the flu shot? Was it that person standing behind you in line at the CVS waiting to give, when you were waiting for the flu shot, who coughed on you and gave you that exposure?
Or were you exposed at church and then you thought, oh my gosh, I better go get that flu shot, and then you ran to CVS after church?
Which is a great idea, but unfortunately the immunization conferred by the shot takes anywhere from 10 days to 3 weeks to occur in your body. So the exposure is quick, the onset of the illness is quick. The protection conferred by the shot is not so quick, which is why we always advocate that as soon as the immunizations are available in late summer, early fall, one get them.
So certainly we want to keep ourselves vigilant about what is around us and who is around us. But, you know, I'm a workaholic. I go to work. I start sneezing, coughing. I start feeling those body aches. I might just say it's better to just power through the day and then go home and get some rest. But what am I doing to the people around me if I'm just coming on with the onset of symptoms?
Well, it's a highly transmissible illness. It's quite contagious. By you being acutely ill in an infectious state, you will transmit that, no doubt. You will transmit that, no matter how fastidious you might think you are being by virtue of hand sanitizers and whatnot. Not to mention, being acutely ill with this and being active or attempting to remain active is in no way going to help you get better. You cannot power through this.
So people at home, if they're sick, they really shouldn't go to work if they can help it. It's really not to the benefit of everyone.
I would be hypocritical if I said that was totally true of myself. I believe I took a total of
Power
5 hours
to
off.
you, dude.
Something's got to work. But wearing a mask and washing the hands and face quite frequently, very helpful. I took a lot of heat from Mrs. Halpert, my mother, Mrs. Halpert, whose advice, of course, is, God bless her, 89 years, go to bed,
Well,
go to bed, and drink lots and lots of tea while you're in bed. Now, my question is,
how do you sleep?
you drink enough tea, you're not going to spend a whole lot of time in bed. But
Bed and
that's
bathroom, bed and bathroom,
different
back and
issue,
forth.
right? But I don't doubt her wisdom.
I understand she was trying to get you to keep those fluids
She was
going.
very angry at me as I was working.
And she's going to be even more angry when she sees this. So there you go. But anyway, so we can try to prevent the spread of the virus. How do we manage ourselves besides, say, go to bed and keep hydrated?
Well, quite honestly, this is a viral illness, and many people go seek out medical attention for this acute illness. They feel quite poorly, and I don't blame them for wanting to get some help for it. But as I tell most of my patients who come in with it, this is real common sense approach healthcare. Literally, what would mom do? Go to bed, lots of rest, lots of fluids, salt water gargles, acetaminophen, ibuprofen, cough suppressants, really medicines that treat symptoms so you can get the rest your body needs. And when your body is ready to fix this problem using its own defense mechanisms, it will, and you will be better, which is true for just so many illnesses that are out there, most of which are all viral. There is a small amount of medication available in terms of influenza specifically that is useful for the management of it. Somewhat in terms of the way an antibiotic works for bacterial infections, there are antiviral medicines that exist for influenza, and they are quite useful. However, they are useful if they are started within the first 48 to 72 hours of the onset of symptoms.
Yeah, usually not when people go to the physician's office.
Not typically, no, but when epidemic illness like influenza strikes, it gets a lot of press, a lot of exposure, so people are more aware of it. They tend to come in sooner. Plus, influenza itself, as opposed to, for example, rhinovirus, upper respiratory infection, head cold, influenza tends to hit hard and fast. One of the ways you know you have influenza, and you're feeling poorly enough, quick enough that you may be driven to go seek care. So in those cases, we do like to try to prescribe these antiviral medicines because they do, by and large, tend to cut down on the duration and severity of symptoms, so you feel better quicker, but also you're less infective for a shorter duration.
So for the rest of us, too.
Correct.
So if you're at home and you're managing your flu and you're in bed, at a certain point, things may go south and you really should seek medical attention. What would be the keys to kind of trigger the, aha, I really need to go to the doctor's office? I need to at least make a call to the doctor's office.
Well, I mean, influenza is a serious illness. Let's not sell it short. As I'm sure you're very well aware, pandemic illness from influenza has swept the globe on several occasions in the 20th century, including now the 21st century with H1N1, and has caused considerable morbidity and mortality.
My great-grandmother died at the age of 29 from influenza.
The 1918 epidemic.
Yep, you got it.
Of course. And yeah, that's a huge deal. Now, of course, symptomatic treatment and support from then to now is much different. I couldn't give your grandma a couple of liter bags of intravenous fluid and some acetaminophen to help her symptoms or cough suppressants so she gets some rest.
Right.
But that being said, you're still at risk for serious outcomes if you're a person potentially at risk, meaning immunocompromised, at extremes of age, suffering from a variety of chronic diseases, chronic illnesses, on certain kinds of chronic medication management schemes, things like that. Hopefully you've already been immunized, but even so, you may be at risk for developing the infection.
What about the very young, like babies? Do you recommend that infants or small children be vaccinated?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And pregnant women?
Especially pregnant women. Recommendations for immunizing infants are quite limited, but the feeling is that immunizing pregnant women, the immunity developed by the pregnant mom will certainly transmit in utero to the fetus.
So a 2-for-1 shot, essentially.
That's a good way to go.
You get a good bargain in the deal.
Right.
So, you know, the extremes of age obviously sometimes have trouble dealing with acute illnesses.
This is because immunologically you're not fully competent. In other words, your ability to mount that immune response is potentially limited. at the extremes of age. That's certainly not true for all. That varies quite a bit, but we worry more about that. The morbidity and mortality in 2009 swine flu epidemic was greater amongst the younger set than it was amongst the older set. I don't know why that was, but it was.
I think the scientists are still trying to figure that out.
But in general, you need to be aware of those situations. So I am very vigilant, as I know many of my colleagues in the healthcare profession are, about being sure their older and younger folks are immunized, lobbying strenuously for that, and certainly trying to involve early medication, antiviral medication use should outbreaks occur, for example, in nursing homes and that kind of thing.
Oh boy, that would be something. So the outbreak that we're in right now, we're shooting this in January. Why do people get sick in the wintertime? Why does it seem that we always peak when it's cold and nasty out?
Well, that depends. I mean, actually, there were several reports that I thought were a bit ominous this summer that came out of, I believe, 3 counties in Florida that reported early influenza outbreaks. Florida, midsummer. I said that was kind of interesting. And our first recorded cases, swab positive cases in our office, we picked up in middle to late October.
Oh, it's still pretty warm here in middle to late October.
It wasn't bad at all. We didn't see a lot of, it was a couple of sporadic ones, but that blossomed maybe mid-November and really took off mid-December. You know, there's lots of reasons immunologically folks aren't just quite as well off in the winter months. I honestly walked in here today, don't tell anybody, but I walked in here today wearing not much more than you see now from the street.
Not without a coat. Your mom is going to be all over you again.
It's going to be bad. But here I am, and we do things that don't always sit as well as they could in terms of staying warm, staying dry, and
hydrated.
Yep. Exactly.
Sure. Well, there is a chance you can always get the flu in the summertime, obviously. I guess if we just keep those kind of good hygiene rules in order, not necessarily this fella, we'll put him away, but if we have, it can't hurt, who dry my skin out, but if we keep going, make sure that if we sneeze or cough that we keep it away from others, that should keep all kinds of nasties away.
Yeah, I mean, right now I think you're going to see a resumption of the usual wintertime upper respiratory felons showing up that were pushed to the side by this tidal wave of influenza that came through over the past month. Typically in the upstate New York region or the eastern seaboard, really, your influenza is really a January, February, March illness, but it can happen, you know, summer, really late summer, early fall, right through the middle spring. It's not impossible. You
talked about H1N1 starting in the middle of summer, so.
Sure. Well, that was actually bimodal H1N1. There was a springtime outbreak of it, and then a early fall outbreak of it, and it peaked in around November of 2009 here. But remember, influenza moves globally, so where we have it here now, the West Coast is just starting to hit the current. Feel the current effects of what we had over the past month. It's moving from east to west, and this thing started out really in you know, East Asia, or East Asia probably last winter. Yeah. And it takes that kind of time. There's this Marco Polo circumnavigation of the globe, and it's going to get there eventually.
Well, Dr. Halpert, we're running out of time, but it's been great to have you in spite of your flu, to talk about the flu and what the viewers out there can do about it. So we hope we can have you back some other time to talk about other of those nasties, as you call it.
It would be my honor.
And it would be great to get the information out there. And so thanks so much for coming in.
You're very welcome.
Dr. Jonathan Halpert from Prime Care Urgent Care. That's it for our show today. I'm Barbara Brabetz. Thanks for watching.
Proctors, bringing the best in arts, education, and entertainment.